Elon Musk owns only 20% equity of Tesla. Jeff Bezos owns only 9% of Amazon. And Jensen Huang owns only 4% of Nvidia. Yet, they are multi-billionaires, like with a big B, not M. So how did these people get rich while only owning a fraction of their company?
Hey everyone, welcome back to Qtro Tutorials. In today's tutorial, we're diving into something really exciting, how to recreate this powerful viral reel style. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to pull off this clean viral reel that looks super professional inside Capcut. And don't worry, I'll break everything down step by step so you can follow along, even if this is your very first time trying something like this. So let's get started. First things first, I've already created a brand new project in Capcut. If you'd like to follow along with the exact same assets I'm using, you can download them from the link in the description and drag them into your project for easy access. I'll also bring in the reference video that contains the original audio so that we can sync our animations perfectly to it. Now here's a quick pro tip before we move forward. Disable auto snapping using this button right here. This will give you full control when moving clips around in the timeline, which is super important when we start syncing everything to the beat. Alright, let's start designing our first scene. We'll begin by creating the clean background you saw in the reel. To do this, drag in a default text clip, remove the text, and then press Windows + period to open the symbol menu. From here, select a square shape and scale it up until it fills the entire screen. At first, it will look white, but to match our reference, we'll use the color picker to grab that nice gray tone from the original video. And there we go, a sleek gray background that sets the tone. Next, let's move to the text. Drag in a new default text, change its color to solid black, and type in Elon Musk. Play around with the font and size until it looks bold and impactful, just like in our reference reel. Once that looks good, we'll bring in our Elon Musk image and use the tools in the video tab to resize and position it neatly between the text. At this point, our scene is already starting to look really clean. Now comes the fun part, animations. Let's start with the Elon Musk text. Head over to the Animation tab and apply either a Typewriter 1 or Typewriter 2 animation, depending on whether you're using the free or pro version of Capcut. This instantly gives your text that stylish reveal effect. For the Musk image, we'll add a smooth fade-in animation so it doesn't just pop in awkwardly at the start. Moving forward, let's recreate that iconic counting effect for the 20% text. Duplicate the Elon Musk text layer, split it up every 2-3 frames, and replace the numbers step by step so it looks like it's counting upward. This technique gives that energetic countdown effect you see in the reel. Once the numbers are in place, we'll group everything into a compound clip to keep our timeline neat and easier to manage. Now, one detail that really sells the animation is the scaling effect on Musk's image. As soon as the numbers start rolling, we'll set a transform keyframe and slightly zoom in on the face over a few frames. This gives the clip motion and energy instead of it staying static. Don't forget to smoothen your keyframes with cubic out, trust me, this makes the animation look way more professional. Finally, let's add the equity text to complete this part of the scene. To keep things consistent, I'll just duplicate the Elon Musk text, remove the old keyframes, and replace the word with equity. We'll position it right below the face and then animate it with a fade-in up effect so it flows naturally into the sequence. Again, smooth those keyframes to keep everything buttery smooth. Alright, let's keep going. The first thing I want to do here is to tidy up our timeline by creating a compound clip. I'll select the percentage animation, the Elon Musk image, and the equity text animation, and combine them into one compound clip. Now, the reason we compound clip so often is simple. It makes the animation workflow much easier. Instead of dealing with multiple separate layers, we group them together so we can animate them as a single object. This keeps things neat, efficient, and prevents confusion when we start layering in more effects. Now, before we bring in the Tesla logo, we want to create a subtle zoom-in effect on Musk's face. This adds movement and keeps the scene dynamic. To do that, I'll add a transform keyframe right where I want the zoom to begin. Then I'll move forward in the timeline to the point where I want the zoom to finish, and slightly increase the scale of the compound clip. This gives us a nice zoom-in effect. As always, I recommend smoothing the keyframes. You can do this by pressing Alt+K and selecting a smoother curve like cubic out. That curve just makes the zoom look more natural and cinematic instead of robotic or stiff. Next, let's introduce the paper animation. This is a stylish little reveal effect that will serve as the transition for our Tesla logo. Once I drag the paper animation onto the timeline, you'll notice that by default, it moves quite slowly. To fix this, I'll simply increase the speed of the clip. Now, I also noticed that the height of this animation feels a bit too large for the design I'm going for, so I'll turn off uniform scale and reduce just the height until it fits better visually. After that, we need a longer version of this animation so we have more room to work with. To extend it, I'll right-click on the clip and choose Freeze Frame. This holds the last frame in place, effectively giving us more footage to work with without affecting the animation itself. Now it's time for the Tesla logo. I'll drag the logo onto the timeline and adjust its size until it fits perfectly over the paper animation. The trick here is to make the Tesla logo feel like it's being revealed by the movement of the paper. To achieve this, we'll use a mask animation. First, I'll go to the end position of the reveal, add a mask, and rotate it at a 90-degree angle so that it lines up with the paper's movement. Then I'll add a keyframe there. Next, I'll move back to where I want the reveal to start. Add another mask keyframe, and drag it into position so that the Tesla logo gradually slides into view as the paper animation moves. This creates a sleek left-to-right reveal effect that matches the motion of the paper. Once that's done, we want to tidy things up again. The paper animation and the Tesla logo are currently two separate layers, so I'll select both of them, right-click, and choose Create Compound Clip. Now they're grouped as one clean clip, making it much easier to manage as we move into later scenes. And just so we're prepared, I'll duplicate this compound clip because we'll need it again in the upcoming scenes. And that's it for this stage. We now have a smooth zoom in on Elon Musk's face, a sleek paper reveal, and a perfectly timed Tesla logo animation. The scene is really starting to come together. Alright, let's continue by creating the animation that will transition our first scene out. On the timeline, I'll select the 3 clips that make up this scene, excluding the background, and then I'll group them together into a compound clip. Now that we have a compound clip, we can animate it as a single unit. To make this scene exit the screen, I'll be using a simple upward movement. Here's how. I'll add a transform keyframe right at the point where I want the animation to begin. Then I'll move forward on the timeline to the moment where I want the scene to be completely out of view. At this point, I'll drag the compound clip upward. This creates a smooth upward transition which essentially animates scene 1 out of the frame. And of course, if you've been following along, you already know what I usually do next to make the transition look even better. That's smoothening the keyframes. To do this, simply press Alt+K on your keyboard. And from the options, choose Cubic Out. This will give the animation a much smoother and more professional finish. By now, I'm sure you've already picked up quite a lot, but don't click away just yet because we're moving on to scene 2 right after this. Actually, this is the perfect moment to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Our goal this year is to reach 50,000 subscribers, and I'd love for you to be part of the family. Alright, let's move on to scene 2. Scene 2 and the next scene share a very similar structure with scene 1. That means if you fully understood the techniques we used earlier, you can skip ahead to a later part of this video using the timestamps I've placed in the description. But if you'd like to continue learning step by step and refine your skills even more, then let's keep going right here. The first step is to bring in our text. Instead of starting from scratch, I'll simply copy the text we created in scene 1 and paste it here in scene 2. Once that's done, I'll replace the text with the name Jeff Bezos. Now you'll notice that this text already carries over the animations from scene 1, the fade-in effect, as well as the keyframe animation that zooms the text in. Since scene 2 follows the same animation style, we'll keep those intact. The only change we'll make is to slightly reduce the text size in the keyframes so that it fits neatly into our new design. Next, let's bring in the image of Jeff Bezos. I'll drag it onto the timeline and resize it so it matches the proportions of our reference video design. To animate this image, I'll add a transform keyframe right at the point where our text animation ends. I'll also add a blend keyframe there, since we want the image to fade in at the same time its zoom animation plays out. If you look closely at the reference video, you'll notice that the image doesn't just appear, it zooms in while gradually fading in. To replicate this, I'll go back to the start of the scene, reduce the image size slightly, and also lower the opacity. This gives us that smooth fade and zoom effect as the image comes into view. Now let's make the movement flow better by smoothing the animation. Just like before, we'll press Alt+K on the keyboard and select Cubic Out to give our keyframes a more natural motion. Great. The next element we need to create is the counting animation. In this scene, the counter will go up to 9%. To achieve this, I'll once again copy the Jeff Bezos text layer and paste it where we want the counter to start. Since we don't want the old animation, I'll clear the keyframes. A quick shortcut for that is simply pressing backspace on the selected keyframes. Once the text is clean, I'll change it to display 9%. I'll then reposition the text slightly above the image to match our reference video. Now comes the fun part, creating the actual counting effect. To do this, I'll go back to the start and split the 9% text clip into sections every 3 keyframes, about 5 times in total. Then I'll edit each section to show progressive numbers, starting from 0 and moving upward until we reach 9%. You can choose to include every number for a smoother look or skip a few numbers to speed up the effect. Once that's complete, I'll select all the pieces and group them into a compound clip. This keeps everything organized and easy to manage. Now, in our reference reel, notice how the Jeff Bezos text moves upward and fades out while the counting animation fades in and moves upward as well. Let's recreate that. First, I'll select the Jeff Bezos text and add a transform keyframe at the point where the animation begins. I'll also add a blend keyframe there. Then I'll move forward in the timeline, drag the text slightly upward, and lower the opacity to 0, making it fade out while sliding up. At the same time, I'll select our counting animation and add a transform keyframe. At the start of that clip, I'll drag it slightly downward and set its opacity to 0. Finally, at the point where the Jeff Bezos text disappears, I'll increase the opacity of the counter to 100%. This way, as one text fades out, the other smoothly fades in while rising. If I scrub over the timeline, you can see how seamless this looks now. But there's more in the reference reel. The background image also zooms in while all this is happening. To replicate that, I'll go back to the start, add a transform keyframe to the image, and then increase the scale slightly forward in the timeline. That gives us a subtle zoom-in effect on the image to tie everything together. As always, don't forget to smoothen all these keyframes using Cubic Out for a professional finish. Now let's add another element, the paper animation that we first used for the Tesla logo in Scene 1. I'll drag that paper reveal clip here and position it where I want it to start. I'll resize it to fit nicely, and since we'll likely use it again, I'll duplicate it for later. Next, I'll place the Amazon logo on top of the paper animation and resize it so it fits properly. To create the reveal effect, I'll add a horizontal mask and rotate the line to 90 degrees. I'll then add a mask keyframe at the beginning and animate it across the paper so it looks like the paper is revealing the Amazon logo from right to left. Looking back at our reference, you'll notice a subtle zoom in happening during this paper animation. To replicate that, I'll first mark the exact point where the paper animation starts by pressing M on the keyboard. This marker will guide us. Once everything is grouped into a compound clip, I'll add a transform keyframe at the marker. Move forward and scale the clip slightly to create that smooth zoom in as the paper reveal plays. And again, don't forget to smoothen your keyframes with Alt+K and choose Cubic Out. Perfect. Scene 2 is now complete. All that's left is to animate this scene out, just like we did before. I'll set a keyframe where I want the transition to begin. Move forward a bit and slide the entire compound clip upward. Finally, I'll smoothen the motion with Cubic Out. And that wraps up Scene 2. But don't go anywhere, we're diving right into Scene 3 next, where we'll continue building on everything we've learned so far. Alright, let's move on to Scene 3. Now this scene is very similar to the first two scenes we already built, so instead of repeating the exact same steps in slow detail, I'll show you how I would approach this if I were editing a reel for a client who wants results quickly. The professional trick here is simple, don't reinvent the wheel. Instead, I'll just take the second scene we edited, copy it, and paste it here in the timeline. Then we'll swap out the assets and make small adjustments to create a brand new scene without starting from scratch. If you didn't quite understand Scene 2 the first time, don't worry, I've added timestamps in the description below so you can always jump back and rewatch that section. This way, you can catch up without missing anything. Now once I've copied Scene 2 and dropped it here, the first thing we'll do is open the compound clip until we find the image that was originally of Jeff Bezos. From here, I'll replace it with our new image, in this case, Jensen Huang. After dragging in the new image, you may notice it doesn't fit perfectly. Sometimes it might be too large or too small. That's completely normal. Just use the adjustment tools in your keyframes to scale and reposition the image so it fits neatly into the design. Remember, I'm moving a little fast here just for the tutorial. In your own project, take your time to polish the placement so it looks clean and professional. Next, let's update the counting animation. You can open the compound clip we created for those animated numbers and tweak them to something unique for this scene. Personally, I'll leave mine as it is just to save time here, but I'd recommend you change yours if you want each scene to stand out. Now let's replace the logo. In Scene 2, we had Amazon's logo, but here we'll swap it out with Nvidia's logo. Drag it in, adjust the size, and make sure it matches the proportions of the scene. These little touches really make the reel feel cohesive. At this point, we've wrapped up Scene 3, but before we move forward, let me emphasize, when you're editing for clients, speed is important, but quality is even more important. I might rush through here, but when you're working on your own projects, give yourself more time to refine each element. Alright, moving on to Scene 4. This one's more exciting because it introduces a talking avatar along with animated text and some interactive effects. Let's break it down step by step. The first thing I'll do is drag in our talking avatar video. Now, since this video was originally in a YouTube frame format, it has black bars on the top and bottom. To fix that, I'll simply scale the video up until it fills the screen. This gives us a cleaner, more professional look. Next, we're going to add those dynamic text captions that appear whenever the person is speaking. This technique is super engaging because it helps reinforce what's being said and keeps the audience's attention on the screen. To do this, I'll drag in a default text layer and place it just below the speaker. Then I'll copy that text 2 more times so we end up with 3 separate text layers. Why 3? Because by splitting the text, we can reveal each word independently and apply separate animations, which makes the captions feel more alive. After creating the 3 texts, I'll change the font so it matches our theme and update the color to match the design style of our reference video. Once that's done, I'll arrange the text on screen so they align like one single smooth sentence. Positioning is key here. Don't be afraid to zoom in and adjust until the words look perfectly balanced. Now let's add animations to the text. I'll make each one fade in, but I'll time them so the words appear one by one, matching the pacing of the speech. After adding those animations, I'll select all 3 texts, press Ctrl+B, and splice them at the point where I want the animation to end. Next, let's add some emphasis. I'll copy one of the text layers and paste it again, but this time I'll change the font to something bolder and replace the text with the word multi. Then I'll paste another text layer below it and replace that one with the word billionaires. At this point, the scene is starting to look bold and dynamic, but here's where it gets interesting. I'll copy the billionaires text and duplicate it. For the duplicate, I'll change the text so it only contains the letter B. Then I'll go back to the original billionaires text and delete the letter B. Now I'll adjust the design so that both texts align perfectly, making it look like one seamless word. Why do we go through all this trouble? Because we're about to create a really cool clickable effect with that letter B. If you notice in the reference video, a mouse arrow comes in and clicks on the letter B, which then transforms into an M. To set this up, I'll first drag in a mouse arrow PNG from my assets and place it on the timeline. By the way, if you're wondering where to find these kinds of assets, you can check out sites like FreePic. For example, if you need a mouse arrow, just search for mouse arrow PNG FreePic, and you'll find plenty of options to use in your edits. Now, back to the animation. I'll add a keyframe where the arrow starts off screen, and then move forward to where I want it to land, dragging it into position so it clicks right on the letter B. At the same time, I'll add a transform keyframe to the letter B so it scales up slightly when clicked. This creates that interactive feel, almost like the arrow is actually clicking the letter. Next, we'll swap the B with an M. To do this, I'll split the B text layer right where the click happens, then change the text to M. After that, I'll carefully adjust the design so the M blends seamlessly with the rest of the word. Finally, to sell the effect of the click, I'll add 2 additional keyframes to the arrow right before and right after the click point, and slightly scale down the arrow in the middle. This gives the illusion that the arrow is pressing down just like a real mouse click. When we play this back, it creates a super clean and satisfying click-to-transform effect. And that wraps up scene 4. To keep our timeline organized, I'll select everything we just created and compound clip it into one single clip. This keeps the project clean and makes it easier to manage as we move into the next part of the reel. Welcome back, editors. We've made it through scenes 1 to 4, and now it's time to wrap things up with our final scene, scene 5. The good news? This is by far the simplest scene of all the ones we've covered. Don't worry though, just because it's simple doesn't mean it isn't powerful. In fact, this is the type of finishing touch that can make your video feel smooth, polished, and professional. This scene is all about combining fade-in and fade-out transitions with a sleek 3D question mark animation to give our reel that viral edge. By the time you're done, you'll have a sequence that feels cinematic yet effortless. Let's jump right in. The very first step is to bring in your footage. Go ahead and drag your video clips into the timeline. In my case, I'm starting with one clip and trimming it down to the size I want. To trim, just drag from the edges of your video until you get the length you're happy with. Now here's a little professional trick. Instead of manually trimming every single clip, we'll make life easier by copying this trimmed clip and reusing it. Hold down Alt on your keyboard or Option if you're on Mac, then click and drag the video forward with your mouse. This creates an exact duplicate with the same length. Once you've duplicated, simply replace the footage with your next video clip. This method keeps everything consistent, and trust me, it saves a ton of time when you're working on multiple clips. Since most viral reels are made for social media platforms like Instagram or TikTok, we want to make sure our video fits perfectly in that vertical 9:16 frame. Click on your video clips and resize them by adjusting the scale until they fill the frame properly. Don't leave any black bars on the sides or edges. That instantly makes your video look unprofessional. The goal here is full screen immersive content. Now let's talk about transitions. If you look closely at our reference video, you'll notice that each clip doesn't just cut harshly to the next one. Instead, there's a subtle fade in and fade out effect that makes the sequence flow smoothly. To replicate this, select your first video clip, go to the Animation tab, and add a fade out animation. On the second clip, add a fade in at the start, and then also add a fade out at the end. Repeat this process across all your clips. This layering of fade in and fade out creates a beautiful cross-dissolve effect where clips flow naturally into each other. It's simple, but it gives your edit a polished look that audiences notice, even if they can't explain why. Now let's spice things up with some graphic animation. In our reference video, we had a cool 3D question mark pop up on screen. This little element keeps the audience intrigued and visually engaged. To add it, drag the 3D question mark animation into your timeline and position it above your clips. By default, this question mark animation is pretty slow and we don't want it to drag. To fix this, we'll adjust the speed settings. Increase the speed slightly so that the animation feels smoother and fits better within your sequence timing. A faster animation often feels more energetic and eye-catching. If you look carefully at the reference, you'll notice there's a darker, moodier theme across the video. This isn't accidental. Effects like this help focus attention on the center of the screen and add depth to your visuals. To replicate this, go to the Effects tab and search for Vignette. Drag the vignette effect onto your timeline above your clips. Immediately, you'll see that subtle darkening around the edges of the frame. This effect gives your reel a cinematic, dramatic feel and keeps your audience's eyes locked onto the main content. It's a small detail, but small details are what separate amateur edits from viral-level content. And just like that, you've completed the final scene of this project. With smooth fade transitions, a stylish 3D question mark, and a cinematic vignette overlay, you've added all the elements needed to make your reel stand out. At this point, I want to thank you for sticking with me through all 5 scenes of this tutorial. If you made it this far, you've officially leveled up your Capcut editing skills. You now know how to use compound clips, keyframe animations, masks, logo replacements, text reveals, cursor animations, and now, smooth scene transitions with extra flair. Remember, the key to mastering Capcut or any editing software is practice. Don't just watch once and stop. Recreate these steps on your own clips, experiment with timings, and put your own creative spin on them. That's how you go from simply following a tutorial to developing your own editing style. And hey, if you're watching this in the future, check my channel. The next episode might already be live, ready for you to binge watch and keep improving.
In the e-commerce world, it's easy to feel like you've got everything under control until you realize just how quickly things can shift. An Amazon policy update here, a TikTok shop trend there. Miss just one crucial update, and you could be left behind.